All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers that follow boxing, you know that tonight there will be what many consider to be a mega bout between two of the more notorious champions in boxing, that being Gennady Triple G Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. And both these fighters have something to prove. Gennady Triple G Golovkin has to prove that he truly is the best fighter in the middleweight division and that he's not getting old, that he's not over the hill. And of course, Canelo Alvarez has to prove that he's not just some steroided up, overrated bum who's been overhyped by the media because he happens to be a Caucasian man from Mexico. So he checks off two of the more important boxes in regards to marketability. So it's going to be very interesting to see who shows up and shows out tonight. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Boy, was it controversial, and we are ready for the rematch. On that note, we bring in HBO's Jim Lampley. Of course, Max is a broadcast partner. Both of you will be calling the fight. Jim, thank you so much for being with us.
Our privilege, my privilege.
I just want to mention also, you have your show, The Fight Game, which is on every Wednesday, and we'll also have Bernard Hopkins' technical breakdown of the fight. We can check that out, too, as well.
Right.
Bernard, Juggernaut, Ironhead Hopkins.
Right.
Jim, I want to start with you on this. What's the biggest difference this time around in this fight?
Well,
The biggest difference in this upcoming fight is going to be exactly what type of fighter Canelo Alvarez proves himself to be without that shit in him. That's what I'm going to be watching for. What is his punch resistance tonight now that he's off the clean? Will he be able to shrug off Triple G's shots like he was in their first fight? He was taking flush right hands and left hooks off the jaw. And I want to know, does he just happen to be a dog like that? Does he happen to have an iron jaw? Or was it that shit that was in him?
well, I think the biggest difference this time around is that they know each other, and they.
Well, they knew each other a little bit before that. They had sparred quite a few rounds. So, I mean, even though in sparring, you're not really showing everything that you can do. You're mostly just working on your weaknesses and trying to get sharper. They were familiar with one another. They had sparred before. Of course, the fight is totally different. So we'll see. Oftentimes, the better boxer is the fighter who's able to adjust in a rematch and have a better performance. So for all intents and purposes, Canelo Alvarez is widely considered to be the better boxer. So presumably, he should have a better performance. But once again, once you factor in the steroids and the fact that he's not going to be on that clenbuterol, we'll see. I saw him at the weigh-in. He looked in great shape. But anybody can look in great shape. Are you truly in great shape? And then on top of that, skills pay the bills. I like Canelo Alvarez's skill set. But one thing that he's always had a problem with are his slow feet as well as his stamina.
And they dislike each other. A year ago, that was a contest between two very respectful sportsmen who had a tendency to respect and even sort of like each other.
Well, they liked each other from a distance. The fact of the matter is that it took way too long to make that fight happen. Oscar De La Hoya was trying to replicate the Floyd Mayweather-Manny Pacquiao business paradigm, and it did not quite work in the same way that it worked for Floyd and Manny Pacquiao, because what neither one of these fighters had that Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao had is a global following. Manny Pacquiao had and still has an international following. He has a huge Asian following, which is the reason why his fight with Floyd became the biggest fight in boxing history. And then, of course, Floyd Mayweather has a huge American following, and he also has a very sizable global following as well. Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez, unfortunately for them, are unable to market their fight to the degree that Floyd Mayweather can market his fight, because neither one of these two fighters speak particularly good English. So that will always hamper them.
And that competition was untainted by emotional aggression of any kind, and now it's entirely different because they despise each other with a violent passion, and what we're about to look at is a blood feud grudge match between two guys who may never speak to each other
Once again, I thought that Golovkin won the first fight, and even in these clips, he certainly looked like the stronger fighter. I'm just not quite sure what Canelo Alvarez can do to adjust, because I think he's going to be the weaker fighter tonight, unless Golovkin just ages drastically in between their last match. And let's keep in mind that Golovkin was the last fighter of the two to have appeared in a real fight. He knocked out Royan back in May. So we'll see who exactly is rusty in this fight.
All of this is over with, but it could be a great fight.
Before I ask my question, I always like to chime in and remind everybody I think I'm sitting next to the greatest voice in boxing, without question.
Well, arguably the greatest voice in boxing today, even though I'm sure that Al Bernstein would have something to say about that. But in regards to the greatest overall boxing commentator, I would have to disagree. I would have to give the nod to Mr. Don Dunphy as the greatest voice in boxing history.
Just want to make
Thank
sure
you,
everybody,
Stephen.
I've
I
always
appreciate
said
that.
and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Here's my question.
Plus, Don Dunphy was not crying like a bitch after every fight like Jim Lampley does.
This dislike that Max educated me about, talking about how real it is, who do you think that gives the advantage to in this rematch?
You know,
I'm not sure if it gives an advantage to anybody, because I'm not quite sure exactly how much any form of dislike or vitriol that Triple G may have for Canelo will assist him, especially since Canelo is a counterpuncher. So Canelo actually wants Triple G to be upset and to attack him irresponsibly. In regards to Canelo, he can be as upset as he wants. He's still not going to bum rush Triple G. I just don't see it. He tried a little bit in their first fight, and he was steroided up and still could not knock him down or knock him out. So I'm sure that he's not going to get a stoppage in this fight, but we'll see. Who knows? People can age very quickly. Am I counting on that happening to Triple G tonight? No, I am not.
That's an interesting question. It can go either way. Obviously, if you're a counterpuncher, you want the other guy to come to you. And if you look at Canelo's record very carefully, he has always been most effective against aggressive fighters. So if Gennady Golovkin is going to be more aggressive than he was in the first fight. And by the way, most people believe Golovkin won the first fight, but he didn't.
I do. I certainly believe that he won. As I've stated, I thought that Canelo actually outboxed him, meaning he showed far more skill and overall dexterity in the ring. But I just thought that Triple G's aggressiveness, his effective aggressiveness, and the fact that he won almost all of the most important rounds, and he was able to transcend the moment when it became pivotal, when it became crucial, and the fact that he was already the champion, he deserved to get that decision. It was very clear to me that Oscar De La Hoya set this entire thing up to, at worst, get a rematch by making sure that it was a draw. And everyone always looks at the judge that scored it 118, 110. No, look at the judge that scored it a draw. Because that is most likely the judge that Oscar De La Hoya paid off.
Didn't win it in the role of Triple G. He won it more as a boxer manager than as an aggressive destroyer. And what people wanted to see is the aggressive destroyer.
So why do you think he did that, Jim?
Well, he might have realized that Canelo is better against guys who go straight at him. And by the way, you know, with the destroyer image and the 23 knockout streak, etc.,
slick boxers are always going to make sluggers or one-dimensional fighters look weird, different, or awkward. Always. And even though Canelo has this reputation for being this great power puncher, he truly has aspirations for being a slick fighter. I guarantee you that Canelo idolizes Muhammad Ali, Pernell Whitaker, and Floyd Mayweather far more than he ever would a Marvin Hagler or a Triple G. You can tell by how he fights. He loves to move his head. He loves to avoid getting hit. He loves to set traps for his opponent. So he's a very good thinker in the ring.
People tend to overlook Golovkin is the best jabber in boxing. He lands more jabs per round than any other fighter in boxing.
Well, part of that is the fact that he fights tomato cans. You just can't look at the stats. The best jabber in boxing, in my view, is Terrence Crawford.
He throws a higher percentage of jabs within his punch assortment than most other fighters do. So when he won with the jab, he was winning with what is truly his number one weapon. But in this fight, I think he won't feel safe and secure unless he's showing the world the destroyer that Triple G is supposed to be. And that could, in fact, if he's too heavy on his front foot, play into the hands of the counterpuncher who's waiting for him to come to him.
I don't think that Triple G is going to be too heavy on his front foot tonight. As a matter of fact, the weigh-in showed me that he intends to utilize his balance a little bit better than he did in the first fight, because he looked very slim at the weigh-in. He looked much slimmer than he did at the first weigh-in, as did Canelo, by the way. So it would not surprise me if this fight ends by rounds 6 or 7, because I think that both fighters are going to be in better shape, or at least they train harder, and they're going to try to utilize many more boxing fundamentals as opposed to engaging in a brawl. But who knows? We'll see.
It's a difficult question. It's one of 1,000 different things about this fight that are impossible to accurately predict going in.
I'm also interested to see what exactly Canelo's going to do after this fight, win or lose, because he has such a strange physical quality to him in regards to his body type. He's not tall enough really to even stay at 160. We see that he came in under 160 for the weigh-in. So is he going to try to get back down to 154, which pretty much right now does not have that many great fighters that he'd be forced to fight because he fights with Golden Boy. I guarantee you that the sanctioning bodies will set him up with a couple of belts at 154. Or does he stay at 160 and try to fight fighters like Daniel Jacobs, who's 6 feet tall, other fighters of that ilk, who I think could give him some trouble. We'll see.
But if I had to say who benefits most if it's going to be an all-out war, that might be Canelo.
This is weird for me. It's like my camp friends and my school friends are coming together. But let me ask you this, Jim, because people a lot of times ask me, what's the greatest fight you ever called, been ringside for, with Jim Lampley? And we've done hundreds probably of this.
Well,
I say Joshua Klitschko, right?
Let me say this very quickly. The most memorable fight that I can remember Jim Lampley calling was the Pernell Whitaker versus Roger Mayweather fight. One of the great fights. Pernell Whitaker against Roger Mayweather. Look it up.
Right, that's for me.
Joshua Klitschko was the greatest event I ever called. And it was a great fight.
Right, great fight. Heavyweight title, and guys are getting off the deck, and the young guy comes. But you have called hundreds of fights also without me, and all across different networks. And as Stephen A. said, I would say you probably you called more great fights than anyone who ever lived.
If we're
What's the
talking
best?
to boxing freak.
Well, he hasn't called more great fights than Don Dunphy. Don Dunphy, for those of you who don't know, is a legend in boxing commentating. He called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre when Sugar Ray Robinson beat the shit out of Jake LaMotta. He called Ali Frazier 1. He called the Thriller in Manila. Don Dunphy, he certainly is the creme de la creme of boxing commentators.
Freaks.
Yes.
And I say Gaddy Ward 1. Everybody knows what we're talking about. All I have to do is say round 9. Everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yes, 2 tomato cans beating the shit out of each other. That's not real boxing. Gotti versus Ward was not real boxing. Not even a little bit. If you want to see great boxing fought at the highest levels with both fighters in their prime, go watch Thomas Hearns versus Sugar Ray Leonard 1, which to me is the best fight that I've ever seen when you check off all the boxes. Great athletes, great boxers, great fighters, great heart, both in their prime. Both at their peak weight class. Sugar Ray Leonard versus Tommy Hearns 1 checks off all those boxes.
It's interesting. We have a feature coming up next week on the Fight Game. Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield, best buddies now, hanging out in Florida. The first fight between Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield, outside of Klitschko Joshua, you can't find a better heavyweight fight than that. Yep.
Let me say this. The heavyweight division in the 1990s was as good as the heavyweight division in the 1970s. A lot of people sleep on how great heavyweight boxing was in the 1990s. It was right there with the heavyweight boxing of the 1970s. Right there. I might give the heavyweight fighting of the 1970s a slight edge just because you had the non-pareil figure of Muhammad Ali hovering as a specter over not only the entire division, but the entire sport, and really all sports at that time. Muhammad Ali was probably the biggest sports figure in the world, him alongside Pele. But just in regards to competition, heavyweight boxing in the 1990s was right there with heavyweight boxing in the 1970s.
Ever.
So my question about this fight, because I've read in the press, you and I haven't discussed it yet, but you said might be the most fascinating prize fight you've covered.
Going in, it's as fascinating as any fight I've ever called.
Bullshit. You're just trying to sell the fight.
Absolutely.
Why?
Yeah. Because of the change in the personality factors since last year, because of the nature of the style matchup. I mean, Stephen A. asked a very logical question. Who benefits if there's more aggression? We could talk for 24 hours about that, to be totally honest, and not come up with a definitive answer one way or another. This fight, despite the fact that people have seen them both before, is a mystery. And it's the perfect mystery for...
I don't really consider it a mystery. because I don't think that Canelo could fight any better than he fought in the first fight. And then you add in the fact that he's off that shit. So the real question is going to be, is he going to get knocked out? And the only other question other than that is, has Triple G aged drastically between his last fight against Modest Royan and this fight coming up tonight? Or has he aged drastically since the first fight with Canelo, and Modest Royan was such a bum that we were unable to verify if Triple G has gone farther over the mountain, over the hill, onto the other side? Because that happens. Sometimes you just match up so well with another fighter that he's unable to expose your weaknesses or your decline. But then you get into the ring with a slick boxer and he's able to expose it. But I just don't see that from Canelo. From what I saw at the weigh-in, Canelo looked very jittery. He looked worried. And I'm not someone who normally does too much psychological profiling at weigh-ins. A lot of boxing fans like to do that. And you really can't do that, because many of these fighters understand the psychological game so well that they're able to hold in whatever it is that they're feeling. They're able to take themselves to a place of composure, not only at the weigh-in, but also on the night of the fight. So people say, oh, well, this guy looked this or he looked that. But Canelo was really coming out of pocket at that weigh-in yesterday. And I think that he's worried that coming off that clean is going to hurt him. So don't be surprised if he gets knocked out or if he gets stopped. We'll hear stories like Canelo was hurt during training camp, or his sparring partners were getting off on him during training camp. They already snuck in that little storyline, that little narrative of he had a knee operation back in April. They already snuck that in there on an episode of 24/7. So we'll see what happens.
Boxing aficionados, because the style matchup couldn't be better. You have the sport's #1 aggressive attacking destroyer, Gennady Golovkin, against the sport's #1.
See, Canelo was trying to knock him out. He just could not hurt Golovkin. He really couldn't even push him back.
Aggressive, power-punching, counter-puncher, Canelo Alvarez. You can't ask for a better matchup in a fight than that.
Jim, Max, I'm looking at this match and I'm saying, if Canelo loses, but he loses in a valiant fight, preferably by decision, his career still ascends. Now, obviously, a devastating knockout loss might be different. Triple G, if he loses, especially if he loses by knockout, it's over for him. That's how I view this.
Well, I would agree with that. If Triple G were to get knocked out by Canelo Alvarez, I'm sure that he would strongly consider retirement. He's never been someone who was considered marketable as it is. He certainly was not a pay-per-view attraction until he fought Canelo. So I'm sure that if he does get stopped tonight, that his team would advise him to retire.
How do you do? Triple G's whole life is on the line. Not just his boxing career. His whole life is on the line tomorrow night. Now, why do you say that?
Oh my goodness, this bitch Jim Lampley's about to cry again. Something's wrong with this guy.
Because if he loses this fight, then everything he did from the moment he left Athens in 2004 was wrong. If he loses this fight, he's not just losing to Canelo. He's losing to the 6 years he spent in Europe at the beginning of his professional career, chasing a title held by Felix Sturm for which he was never going to get a chance to compete. He's losing to a decision he made about how to construct his career that basically put him in limbo for 6 years. And
as I've stated earlier, I think that Triple G's physique looks better here than I've ever seen it look. Certainly around the midsection. He's going to be very, very ready for Canelo tonight. Or it could be, as Teddy Atlas has tried to espouse, Triple G may have overtrained. And that happens to certain older fighters. They overtrain, trying to overcompensate for their age, and they leave it all in the gym.
Ultimately brought him to the United States as something of an underground legend. What would Triple G be if he had come straight from his loss in Athens at the end of the Olympics in 2004 to the United States? Could have been an entirely different story. Could have been a much, much bigger star. Could have had a larger imprint on the history of boxing.
What about you, Jim?
Well, how many could-haves are we going to list, Jim Lampley, before you start crying like a bitch?
Jim, how would you view Triple G? Having said that, given the fact that his strategy when he got here was basically just keep fighting everyone and eventually you'll get a big fight. Let's say he loses decisively in the rematch. Do you consider Triple G nevertheless a great fighter, or was he overrated because he was avoided?
I would still consider Triple G a great fighter. He's great for what he does. Every fighter is not going to be Floyd Mayweather. Some fighters are just great for what they do. There are certain fighters that they don't check off all the boxes. They don't have the best head movement, the best elusivity, the best jab. But there are certain fighters that just have a great chin, great heart, and great power. They can come forward and they can knock you the fuck out. And that's Triple G.
A lot of people stay too long at the fair, and Triple G is 36 years old, almost 37. When he weighs in today at 160 pounds, that will be the 390th time he has weighed in at 160 pounds. You think you can find any other fighter in the history of boxing who's weighed in at the same weight 390 times? It's an absolutely incredible career. He's trying to make a statement tomorrow night to say that he's the greatest middleweight of all time. But if he loses the fight, his entire career was a failure.
Well, no, he's actually not trying to fight to prove that he's the greatest middleweight of all time, because he's never going to have that title. Now, he may be able to say, I've had the most defenses of any middleweight ever. But even his trainer, Abel Sanchez, is on record as stating that there will never be another middleweight on the level of Sugar Ray Robinson. His own trainer, Abel Sanchez, who's also his best hype man, said that himself. And of course, we know about Bernard Hopkins, we know about Marvin Hagler, we know about Carlos Monzon. So, Triple G is great. His name will go up there with all those other legends, but no, he's not fighting to be considered the greatest middleweight ever tonight. That's just not possible.
My question to you would be, is he an old 36? When you say 390 times, you're thinking, man, he's not just 36, he's an old 36. But if you're a knockout artist and you're beating up everybody and you haven't been subjected to a significant level of punishment, it might not be an old 36. How do you view him?
In the eyes of most observers last year, he fought the best possible opponent and he won the fight. In the eyes of most observers. So how can I say he is already an old 36? He might be teetering on the edge, but he also might have one more great performance in him. And if he can deliver that...
Somebody get Jim Lampley a Kleenex and a tampon, because he's crying like a bitch.
That great performance, and he can win this fight the way his legacy and his destiny require him to do, then he's made his statement. I would advise him to retire. I really would. I don't think he will. But I think at the end of the day, there's nothing else Triple G can do to further polish his apple if he wins this fight.
So much on the line for both of them. Jim, thank you so much for being with us. Looking forward to, of course, watching that fight and watching you too.
Yes, thank you, Jim Lampley, for your contribution. Now head to the bathroom and clean yourself up. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Hall of Fame fighter and also the owner of Golden Boy Promotions, Mr. Oscar De La Hoya.
We are here at Beer Park getting you set for Canelo Triple G 2. And who better to discuss it with than the chairman and CEO of Golden Boy Promotions and a 10-time world champion, Oscar De La Hoya, in the house. Good to see you.
Hi, good morning.
Hello, Molly. Let me compliment you on your makeup. Where did you buy your lipstick? I would love to wear it.
I want to start with Canelo, who said he felt like he was robbed in this first fight. Do you agree?
I had him up 7-5. The fight was close. The fight could have gone.
Oscar, stop lying. You know damn well you had Triple G up 7-5, but you tore up your own scorecard.
Gone either way. It was one of those fights where it was so close. A few punches were the difference. I believe.
A few punches were the difference between what? It was a draw.
I believe Canelo was up 7-5.
Do you think he's more ready for this fight than he was for the first one?
Yes.
Why?
Mentally, physically, we know he's more than ready.
How do we know that? He's off that shit. We don't know if he's physically more than ready. As a matter of fact, that's the main thing that we don't know. The main thing that we're going to find out tonight is how good a jaw that boy really have. Because he's off that shit. And he's going to get hit with some flush shots. I don't care how good his head movement and his upper body movement is. Eventually, unless Canelo just happens to catch Triple G with the perfect punch, eventually Triple G is going to break through Canelo's defense and he is going to get hit with flush shots. We're going to find out a lot. But I do think as long as it lasts, Canelo is going to be a little bit more comfortable than Triple G because he's the better pure boxer. But just because he's more comfortable does not mean he's going to win. Triple G does not strike me as a fighter who particularly needs to be comfortable because he's so confident in his power. So he can just walk through all your counters. That's basically what he started to do in the first fight. And I think that unless Canelo catches him with the perfect shot in this fight, that is what Triple G is going to do in this fight as well. He's going to walk right through all of Canelo's counters, especially if they don't have the sting that they had in the first fight because he's off that shit.
He was now working on speed. If you see him, he looks leaner. He looks.
Is that good?
It's very good because we know he's strong, but the speed is going to be a huge factor in this fight. We know what Golovkin's going to do. He's going to come forward like a robot, try to knock out the Canelo. He's not doing anything different in this fight, but Canelo is just he's learning, he's growing. He has different tools in his arsenal, and we're going to see him Saturday night.
Well, we know one of the tools that he had, he's not going to have in this fight, Oscar De La Hoya. And that's the bottom line of it. That clenbuterol is not going to be in the system tonight.
Oscar, as Canelo's promoter, it's like if I hear the guy's promoter saying, I thought he won 7-5. To me, that sounds...
Thank you, Max Kellerman. I have to give you credit because you didn't have to say that. For your promoter to say, I think you won 7-5, really means that I think you lost 7-5.
I think people can read between the lines, but what I did see from Canelo in that fight is he started quickly, left a good impact, and he ended fast. He ended strong in the championship rounds. But in the middle rounds, Golovkin seemed to really dominate. Have you spoken to Canelo at all about that long stretch in the middle? Like, what can he do?
He can't do shit, Max Kellerman, because he's always had stamina issues. And there are just certain fighters that have those problems. If they don't train hard enough, or if they're just not naturally genetically gifted with great stamina, they are going to have a letdown in the middle of the fight. Normally around rounds 4 to about round 7 or 8. Fighters like that have stamina issues, no matter how hard they train, they're going to start to recede in their performance because their body's just going to start to fail them. Now, every once in a while, you have fighters that you call cardio horses, like a Floyd Mayweather, a Pernell Whitaker, Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, who could fight all the way straight through the fight. As long as they train hard, they could fight all the way from rounds 1 to 12 or 1 to 15. But someone like Canelo, he's always going to be dogged by those stamina problems. And that's why I say that him coming off of that clean, we're going to learn a lot about him tonight because Gennady Golovkin is very reminiscent of a Joe Frazier. He's a truth machine. He's going to expose whatever it is that is within you, whether it be good or bad.
To control those rounds, too.
Well, he must pace himself. He does want to come out right from the start, right from the first bell. He wants to come out strong. He wants to knock out Golovkin. I mean, and he really means it. When I hear him say it, I believe him.
I really believe him. He told me that he wanted to knock out Triple G. I said, hold on. Let me take off my skirt.
I've never heard Canelo say that he wants to knock somebody out, and I believe him.
Does he really hate him?
He does.
Hate? That's a strong word.
Hate is a strong word.
Right.
But he wants to knock him out. Okay. He doesn't dislike.
All that hate bullshit is just to sell the fight. That's all it is.
Dislikes him.
Do you think, like, before the final Pacquiao-Marquez fight, I thought Marquez would knock Pacquiao out because what I was hearing from Freddie Roach and Pacquiao is we have to go get him. All the other fights are too close. We got to go get him. And I thought, wow, a counterpuncher like Marquez, if you go get him, you're going to run into something. Of course.
Right, but let's frame it in proper context, Max Kellerman. The reason why Freddie Roach and Manny Pacquiao were saying we have to go get Marquez is because they felt like they got robbed in the Tim Bradley fight. So Pacquiao's attitude is, I have to get this knockout. I can't let it go to a decision because the third fight, they gave me the decision and many people thought that Marquez won that one. So Pacquiao said, you know what? Bob Arum is trying to cash me out. If I don't get this knockout against Marquez, I'm not going to get the decision. And he made that fateful decision to try to go all out against Marquez, and he got hit with the perfect punch. To be honest with you, I thought that Pacquiao was dead when Marquez hit him.
Do you guys feel that Golovkin's team means it when they say he needs to be aggressive, fight next stuff, more so in the first fight, and therefore that'll give Canelo the chances, or do you think they're just talking about that?
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Golovkin can expose himself much more in this fight than the first one.
I think that Golovkin is going to try to check to see exactly how much power Canelo has early. And depending on how much power he feels from Canelo's punches in the first couple of rounds, that's going to determine exactly how much so-called Mexican style he tries to bring at Canelo.
Golovkin wants to knock him out. And when Golovkin wants to knock you out, he makes mistakes. He leaves himself open. The power shots he throws are not compact. They're wide open. And Canelo's smart enough to counterattack, to throw his
While Oscar Canelo was countering him with hard shots in the first fight, he could not even drop him, much less stop him.
Abel Sanchez, Triple G's, trainer, he's been talking a lot about Canelo.
Yes.
And Max pointed out, Max and I were talking about this off the air yesterday, because I asked Max about this. I said, is this man trying to bait Canelo into making it a street fight, because that could possibly work to Triple G's advantage? Is that what you think is happening? And if so, what are your thoughts about it?
Absolutely, it's exactly what's happening, and I hope he does fight with more passion. Talking about Canelo,
right.
I want Canelo to push Golovkin back. I have a strong feeling that Golovkin does not know how to fight going backwards.
Well, I guarantee you that he does not know how to fight going backwards. But the thing with Canelo, if he intends to approach Golovkin in a strong way, like you're recommending, his defense better be very, very, very slick. And he better be very consistent, and his conditioning better be ethereal, to say the least.
I feel that if you push back the bully, he will resist and you will beat him.
You mean, when you say push it back, you mean fight him off, or sometimes just lock him up in a clinch and walk him back?
Walk him back, lock him up, just bully him. You have to bully him.
That takes a lot of energy as well. And Canelo's going to have to be the naturally stronger man to do that. And I guarantee you Golovkin's going to come into that ring very, very strong. And if Canelo is not as strong as he normally is when he's on that shit, he might try to wrap Golovkin up and Golovkin fight his way out the clinch and knock him out right there. Who knows?
Bully him.
One thing that irks me is when the camp of the aggressive fighter, after a tough, close fight, maybe a loss, maybe a decision they didn't love, criticizes the other side for not standing and fighting. I go back to Pacquiao and Mayweather. How do you think Floyd's going to fight? It's on you to do something about it, right?
Of course.
Same thing here. I wasn't crazy about the criticism of Canelo. I thought Golovkin won the fight, but I didn't like the criticism by Triple G's camp saying, oh, he needed to stand and fight. Canelo's a counterpuncher. You got to make him fight. What do you think about that idea?
I'm still trying to figure out in what round did Canelo run.
Yeah, I don't think he ran at all.
He boxed him beautifully. He boxed him beautifully.
Canelo boxed the best that he could. But there were a couple of rounds where it was very clear that Canelo was looking for a little break during the round. And he did not want any smoke from Golovkin.
He gave him a little movement, but basically was there to be hit if you took a chance.
Exactly. I mean, you talk about in Eric Morales, who's a boxer puncher. You talk about Mantequilla Napoles, who is a beautiful boxer puncher. They never ran. They never got criticized because they were superior. They were fighters who adjusted and won their fights intelligently. Golovkin, he knows one mode. That's it. Go forward, fight like a robot, and try to knock you out.
Jim Lampley was just on, and he essentially said that Triple G's career is on the line in this fight. Do you think that's accurate?
That's just a great way for Jim Lampley to try to sell the fight by adding this theatrical element, this do-or-die element to the fight. And he's doing a good job of promoting the fight. That's all he's doing.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because look, I mean, Triple G unfortunately hasn't had those marquee names.
Well, we all know Triple G wanted to fight Sergio Martinez, but Sergio Martinez ran from him for a couple of years. And that would have been his marquee fight. Instead, Sergio Martinez chose to fight Miguel Cotto. And we saw what happened when that ended up occurring. Miguel Cotto beat the shit out of him, of course. Sergio Martinez was done by then. His leg was gone. So therefore, he was unable to move around the ring. He looked old in that fight. And to be quite frank with you, it looked like whatever substance may have been in his system, he was forced to not take. And I'll leave it at that. Allegedly. Allegedly.
Those fighters, those champions where he can, create a legacy for himself that is gonna solidify his career. He's had 20 some odd defenses, but with who? I strongly feel that if Golovkin gets blown away by Canelo Saturday night,
right.
Yes, I do believe his legacy is on the line, and his reputation and his career.
All right, Oscar, but you promote Canelo.
Yes.
What if Canelo loses? What if he loses devastatingly? What about his future?
Yeah, well,
That's a great question, Stephen A. Smith.
he's 27 years old. He's still young. He can still regroup himself.
In other words, back to the drawing board.
I strongly believe that if Canelo loses, we're going to see a hell of a fight.
You said that Triple G fights one way like a robot. He comes forward, tries to knock you out. That's the only way he can fight. You fought a guy like that, great fighter in Felix Trinidad, when you were both in your primes and you were criminally robbed. You clearly won the fight and got robbed, right? And yet still you were on your bike the last 3 rounds because sometimes that killer robot is what is difficult about fighting a guy like that? Because it's not like you just knocked Trinidad out in 3 rounds. You had your hands full.
Well, number one, Felix Trinidad had extremely fast hands. And number two, the man had extremely hard fists. Number three, the man may have been altering his gloves and or his hand wraps to make his power even greater than it was naturally. So those were the issues that Oscar De La Hoya was dealing with that night against Mr. Felix Trinidad. The fact of the matter is that had Oscar chosen to actually box Felix the last 3 rounds of that fight and got the decision, we're probably talking about Oscar De La Hoya as one of the top 10 fighters in the history of boxing.
Well, let me tell you the truth about that fight, that those last 3 rounds were the most difficult rounds that I had in the entire fight because I ran. When you let a fighter that pressures you and that hits hard and you start running in your bicycle, he gains momentum.
So it's like a football team. We were just talking about the Falcons going to prevent offense or something.
Also, let me say this. Not only was Oscar running, but he was not throwing. If you ever watched the first Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston fight, actually Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston, Ali did a lot of moving in the first 3 rounds. But intermittently, he would stop and he would throw combinations. And that undoubtedly confused Liston because Ali was so fast, not only with his feet but also with his hands. And then on top of that, it was very clear by Liston's reactions to Ali's flurries that Cassius Clay hit way harder than he thought he could hit. And that's where Oscar lost his fight and also lost a lot of esteem in boxing circles, was because he ran from Felix Trinidad and he was not even stopping momentarily to throw combinations. He was not doing what he's advocating for Canelo to do, which is hold, box every once in a while, and move. Like what Mr. Pernell Whitaker did in his classic performance against Julio Cesar Chavez, in which he was robbed. He did exactly what Oscar De La Hoya is advocating for Canelo to do tonight.
And it makes it harder for you.
Well, help me out, boxing analyst extraordinaires here, because here's my thing. If you're the aggressor and you're coming at him and you're saying running from him lends itself towards giving that fighter momentum, well, damn it, standing in front of him is as hazardous to your health as well. Well, what do you do, Oscar?
Well,
what Oscar's saying is that you should make the power puncher fight off their back foot. That's all he's saying, Steve.
what you do is you stand on your toes, you move side to side, and you use your own force and power and will, and make him believe that you're not gonna.
You don't just give ground.
No,
you do
you
what
don't give
Holyfield
ground.
did to Tyson first go round.
Exactly.
You do what Mosley did to Margarito, not what Cotto did to Margarito.
Thank you very much.
Well, I tell you what, since you guys mentioned Evander Holyfield and Shane Mosley and their performances against all-time bullies, Mike Tyson and Antonio Margarito, respectively, let me say this. What Evander Holyfield and Shane Mosley both had in common in those performances is that they both had some hellified shit in them. They had some grade A steroids, performance-enhancing drugs in their system. I don't give a damn who don't like that. Allegedly they had that in their system.
Oscar, before we let you go, I've been reading some things. You're mentioning the word running. Running for president? Was that just tongue-in-cheek? Are you serious?
No, we're considering it.
By today's standards, he's more than
I
qualified.
was very exactly.
True.
Exactly. If Arnold Schwarzenegger runs for governor and win, then we might have something here.
I must confess, I would strongly consider voting for you, sir. I mean, you're smart, you're a good businessman, you've got compassion, you know what you're doing. I would have to say, I'd have to consider it.
Thank you very much.
I'd have to consider endorsing you.
Well, we know this. Oscar can get the male vote. He can get the female vote. He can get the homosexual vote. He can get the transgender vote. So, I mean, that's a lot of bases.
You're not busy enough right now. You might as well run the country, too.
I'll have to find some time.
He has started a successful company. Not everyone who's been elected president has done that.
Okay. On that note, before we get into trouble.
Yo, what's up with Max Kellerman's beard, man? This man look like Two-Face. Let me rewind this shit back.
Trouble.
He has started a successful company. Not everyone who's been elected president has done that.
Okay.
Look at this fool's beard. The man shaved half his beard off. What the hell is going on? The man shaved half his mustache off. Somebody check Max Kellerman's medicine cabinet, make sure that he's taking his meds. Allegedly.
On that note, before we get into trouble, Oscar, so appreciate you being with us, and this weekend's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk to you soon.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait.
And maybe we'll be voting for you.
Thank you.
And let me also say this, because I don't think that I've given my official prediction for this fight tonight quite yet. Even though I respect greatly Canelo Alvarez's overall boxing skills, I think that not only will Triple G win this fight tonight, but I think that he's going to get a late round stoppage. Somewhere around rounds 9 or 10. The damage that he's going to be putting on Canelo Alvarez is going to be a little bit too much. So we'll see what happens. But I do think that Triple G is going to get the stoppage tonight, somewhere around rounds 9 or 10. So peace.